Hey, this is Kevin, and today we're going to do a deep dive on the now discontinued Seek Outside Sunlight. We're also going to compare and contrast it a bit to the QU Mountain Star deep dive that I did a couple weeks ago because they're both two-person tents. This one, the QU, was a freestanding, and this is a trekking pole tent that is not freestanding. Now, I think there's a little bit of delineation that needs to be made in the freestanding, not freestanding part. The big benefit with freestanding is really that its structure is made by the pole pieces, right? So you can take the structure and you can move it from here to over there to somewhere else and stake it down. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to perform better in wind or anything like that. And in fact, in the case of the QU, which is known to perform pretty well in wind, a little breeze like I have right now, it would blow away quite easily and it would just start going across the yard. Now, very full disclosure here, I haven't slept in this particular tent, but I do have a Seek Outside Sunlight that I have spent many nights in. I have slept in it all the way from up in the Arctic to all the way to parts of the PCT and down southern United States, on and on. And this is also an important fact as well. I designed this tent, and you will notice that this has a zipperless closure, which I'm going to talk about, and I also own the patent on the zipperless closure. So let's get going. First off, this is a non-freestanding tent, so it uses a trekking pole or a carbon pole like this. Now, in comparison to the QU, which was I think around 3.3 pounds, 3.5 all in, this tent I weighed with stakes and everything in the stuff sack, and it was 2.66 without the poles. These carbon fiber poles you can buy separately, and they are probably about 4 ounces, but if you're using trekking poles, that's something you're really not going to use. The first thing is this tent is much larger inside than the QU. The QU had a max width, I think, of 50 and was in the 40s at one end and was maybe 7 feet long. If it was 7 feet, it was pretty close because I literally took up from end to end in it. This tent is 8 feet 3 inches, I believe, base to base. It is 5 feet 60 inches in the center, so 10 inches wider in the center, and then it's 50 at both end points. Also, when you use the guy outs, you can get a fairly steep pitch near the end, so you really aren't losing much space there. It does set up very quickly. I would say when properly configured, this sets up quite a bit quicker than the QU because you do not necessarily need to assemble the pole structure. And this is 6 stakes, stick in 2 poles, and you're ready to go. You'll also notice it is fairly windy today. So we are out here in some real conditions. Now, it has a zipperless closure, which will go around to the other side to see. This has worked very well over time, and it does provide some benefits, and it opens up very easily. Now, what some people do not like is the trekking pole in the middle that they have to work around. So you can cant the pole, but the way this tent is designed, it actually does aid. You can get the floor out a bit better when you are using the actual trekking pole in the center. It does have 2 guy outs. It is made from a much more burly fabric. This is a 30 denier nylon floor, 30 denier nylon ripstop fabric in the main shell. I think the QU was like a 15 denier in the main shell and then maybe a 20 denier. Now, one of the downsides is this requires seam sealing. The QU came seam taped. So this has been seam sealed. I did buy it off someone off of eBay. I know, sounds pretty odd. I designed this tent, but I was a little bit forced out of Seek and stuff like that as well. So I'm going on with my life and going to make this tent available under the new brand Bearing Co., which I am starting. So this is a dual side entry, so it's very convenient for two people. I've slept in here a ton by myself. It doesn't seem super bad like that. Now, one thing people will say as a detraction is that it does take up quite a bit more space. It's not near as space efficient in a tight space, where the QU would definitely win there. However, you also do not need to actually run the zipperless stuff all the way to the ground a lot of times. I mean, you can actually just lift this up, and I often will sleep in it like this with it fully open and not worry about it, especially if it looks a little bit sunny or I mean a little bit clear. And if it starts to rain, then I will reach out and just pull this down. Now, full disclosure, also, when I originally designed this, it was fully zipperless. It used a magnetic style closure along here. That was a little bit too much pushing the envelope for some people at Seek, so it has a zipperless. I actually believe the magnetic closure was better. I believed it was faster to get in, faster to get out, quieter, and had several advantages like that. I am not trying to be Mr. Bitter or anything like that. Now, one of the things about the QU that you can definitely notice is the QU did a much more minimalistic job at stuff. For instance, this is pretty burly shot cord here. Likewise, this is fairly burly, grosgrain sort of tie back. It was much more minimal and frankly looked, I would say, more intentional and a little more dialed in the QU. This seems a little rough around the edges. There's also a couple things that have been done over the years that bother me a little bit. Like, I don't think these really came assembled to the quality that they need to. I think there was a little bit of shortcutting on it there. However, this tent it is really good at keeping you dry. It handles condensation extremely well. Especially being a single wall integrated, that's the other thing. But you are missing some of the nicety features that you would get in like a QU, where you had, say, pockets sewn into here and a little netting up top, things of that nature. Anyway, if you have questions, comments, would like to see something specific done, or if you think that something like, say, the magnetic closure is excellent or awful, go ahead and let me know. The zipperless part has been fairly well proven. Thanks for watching.